Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with Colledge. We have a very special event planned for you this evening, a look into the student experience through a conversation with one of our very own Colledge graduates. So for anybody who hasn't been joining us for Live with Colledge, it is a part of our college admissions literacy series, which is a series dedicated to bringing students and families better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. I'm Kelsey Tarosian, the Director of Admission Services at Colledge, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us tonight. So talking about college essays, it's no secret. College essays are the single heaviest lift of the college application process. And honestly, as the pandemic has pushed schools away from standardized tests, the essay now actually looms larger than ever in college admissions. So knowing about how many of you seniors out there are facing those essays, we wanted to bring you a little bit of insight about essay writing from the student perspective. So, so much about this process is honestly not within the student's control. And our goal with tonight's broadcast is to help you take full advantage of the elements of your admissions process that you do control, namely the essay. So sit back, absorb. I know there's going to be a lot to learn tonight. A couple of little notes before we get started. This session is being recorded, and we will send the recording out to all of you. So I want to just encourage all of you to be present. And if you're happening across our live stream on Facebook or YouTube, but didn't sign up through Eventbrite for a ticket, but you'd like the recording sent to you, I'm going to go ahead and put the link to sign up on Eventbrite into the comments box now. If you go ahead and sign up for a free ticket, you can just continue streaming here. Then we will make sure to send you a recording of tonight's event after the show. So please hit like if you are finding this useful so that we know how we're doing. And I want to encourage all of you to please feel free to pop any questions you may have into the comments box as we go. We will have time for questions at the end of tonight's event, and we want to get to all of your questions. Without further ado, though, I am really excited to invite our interviewee to join the stream. Hi,
Hello.
I'm pleased to introduce all of you to one of our college graduates, a person I had the tremendous honor of working with this year, Zack. Welcome, Zack. I'm so glad that you could join us tonight.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So for all of you who don't know Zack, he just graduated from high school. Big congratulations. And even bigger congratulations is going to be attending the George Washington University in the fall. Zack is, I came to know, a very remarkable writer. He's also a documentary filmmaker with a passion for change and a wonderful propensity for working with younger students. He worked really diligently last summer to deepen into his writer's voice. He never gave up. He did so many revisions, and all of his hard work paid off in his ED admission to his very top choice school in the fall. So we thought he would be, just the best voice to bring you some insight. So welcome, Zack.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited to share my wisdom, I guess, with everyone.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm excited for you to share a little bit about that essay writing experience with our audience. But I'm wondering if you could start us off with sharing just a little bit about the process in general from your perspective before we got started in earnest together just over a year ago. How did you feel? What was it like kind of getting ready to apply as a rising senior?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure this is no secret. There felt like there was a lot of pressure. It was very, daunting because I had heard, a lot of stories, and it was especially sort of difficult because COVID had just sort of really hit, and no one knew what the college process was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wasn't going to be doing any standardized tests. And yeah, I thought there was a lot riding on my essays, and which, there was. But yeah, I started just writing essays and trying to find my footing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that when you haven't done it before and you only have one chance to get it right and end up at somewhere for 4 years, I can understand how that would feel daunting, and especially last year. Last year was a year like no other. Hopefully not a year we're going to have again. And you really faced it brilliantly. So before we dive into I'm eager to get to the conversation about essays, but before we do that, I want to share a little bit with our audience about what we've noticed at Colledge about how the admissions landscape has actually changed as a result of the pandemic, as you're mentioning. So I know Zack mentioned that he already kind of knew that he didn't want to have tests be a part of his application packet, but all schools pretty much went test optional, which opened the door even broader for students like Zack. And as a result of that shift towards test optional, there was actually a huge spike in applications at many highly selective schools. So as just an example, schools like MIT, Caltech, and Harvard all saw a spike in their applicant numbers of 60%. And so, of course, that meant that their admit rates just plummeted at so many of the highly selectives, and not even just the highly selectives like the three I named that saw the really big increases, but across the board at many highly selective schools. And then on the flip side, interestingly, there were also many colleges and universities that were slightly down this year in applications. So it's kind of a nuanced shift in the landscape. And what does that mean for our rising seniors? And I think it means kind of the same thing it meant for your class, Zack, which is that it's really even more important than ever that you curate your list and that you really pick colleges carefully, because it really is all about this combination of fit and, how you fit with a school, how a school sees fit in you, and you as a, value add person to bring onto their campus and their community. And the other piece, which is balance on your list. You don't want to, you want to reach for some schools that might be tougher to get into, but you also want to make sure you have options at the end of the day. And so thinking about that process of best right fit, that's really where we're centered, right? It's very student-centered work. And in my estimation, you specifically, Zack, had such a successful process because you were really, really open-minded early on when we were thinking about colleges and college research. And you identified a fantastic ED school really early on. You took that college research seriously. You applied only to programs that felt like a really, really good match, not just I could go there. You were more intentional than that. And then you deepened into that writing voice and really wrote your way into college. So I would love to hear about the writing process from your perspective. And starting at the beginning, I remember at the beginning that you were pretty eager to get finished with your essays quickly. So I would love to hear a little bit about getting started on your writing from you.
Yeah, I remember when I was starting on my writing, I really didn't know what it was all about. I started writing sort of, fresh out of high school writing, or not out of high school, fresh from high school, writing a lot of essays and argumentative pieces, and sort of writing like that in a more robotic, academic tone that, big words and stuff like that, make an essay shine. And as I wrote, I realized that my essays were not coming out how I would like them. And, the way I wanted to portray myself was through more of a conversational means. So I wanted to be, because that's really what a college essay is. It's a conversation between you and a college where you are only talking about yourself, really, and pitching yourself. And I found that as I wrote, I had a finished or a draft of an essay, and I would just completely hate it, and I would try and redo the entire thing. And I just kept doing that over and over and over until I sort of started to capture that voice that sounded more how I talked than how I wrote. Which ended up being successful. But I started to realize that it was really about that sort of experimentation and trying to figure out different ways to sell yourself and sort of show the schools how you'll fit into their programs and how they can also reciprocate that and help you.
Yeah, I love how you're putting it. Like it's a one-sided conversation with the college, right? Because the admissions officers on the other side are reading your entire application packet. They're reading all of your materials, and they're trying to paint a picture of you. And so if you don't come through in your writing, it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. And it's really interesting to hear a student say that you felt like you were kind of stuck in this academic essay writing voice, right? Where you hadn't really explored a more personal essay style. And that's something that I see so commonly that it's great to hear it from your perspective, because the kind of writing that you do in high school, that you learn to do in high school, and you probably do really well at this point, it doesn't work that well for college essays. And this kind of writing is not something that students get much practice in. And so what was, when you came down to the table, I know that you really did a great job just now describing your process and coming to the point of experimentation and rewrites and just getting to the point where you developed your writer's voice. But early on, like, what did you kind of think the writing process was going to be before you started?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be kind of like a one and done thing. I would write a couple drafts of an essay, and be done and just crank out like all of the school's essays and, be done before school started in the fall, and just, be able to focus on my studies and submit my essays when the time came around. Which, looking back, that sounds completely ridiculous, because the essays are something that you really work at. Yeah. And so looking at it, when I was starting, like I said, it was sort of like the one and done thing. And I thought, it shouldn't be hard to sell myself to a school. But, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot that you need to know about the school, and also a lot that you need to know about yourself and figuring out how you want to portray yourself and what aspects of yourself that you want to really put on display to the schools. Because, every school holds different values higher than others. And if you can show those parts of yourself to those schools, it'll really click.
That's such great advice. And you really, you should go become a counselor. You've got such great wisdom now. I think that it really is about not just, selling yourself. And I think a lot of students come into it, not you didn't, but come into it thinking that the essay is going to be just kind of a brag sheet almost turned into an essay. When what it really is a process of self-discovery. And you need to know yourself before you can really show yourself. And you can really, sell, but like demonstrate those things that are important to you. You have to identify them first. And so being willing to explore, as you said so well, is really key. So I do remember that moment at the end of summer when you were kind of wanting them to be finished. You'd knocked out a couple of drafts. I think you were thinking you were still like maybe in a more academic essay type of mindset. And your essay specialist, James, and I kind of pushed you to keep going and do some rewrites. Can you share a little bit about what happened and like how you turned that corner?
Yeah, the thing that was really helpful for me was free writing, which is basically where you just kind of write without stopping. And I started free writing with just sort of telling a specific story with, like, I just looked up prompts online and I did those. But then I started doing it where, instead of thinking about what I was going to write, just sort of talk on the page, and articulate myself that way. And, if you look at it from an academic perspective, it's not, that won't fly in an essay. You're not using any good big words. You're not really making an argument, but to a college, it shows more of your personality and how you are when you're not sort of putting on that academic guise. And yeah, so the free writing was really helpful. Another thing was just experimentation and seeing what worked, putting out, focusing on one thing, part of the prompt in an essay, and sort of figuring out how to weave that between the parts of myself I wanted to put on display. That's a difficult task, and that's something that someone really needs to work at. But once you sort of start working at it, it gets a lot easier, and it makes an essay much more successful.
Absolutely. And I think, I remember the conversations you're talking about where, you're a wonderfully articulate person when you come to speak, and your writing is really excellent as well. And so when we came up with that idea of like, hey, write this story like you're writing it to your best friend, and just get it out. Like you're talking in your normal voice. It really pushed you to change a corner. And I think that that's some of the benefits of, being able to work really closely with somebody on your essays, is that you can have those ideas and that external perspective about everybody's, writing voice is going to sound different, right? Not everybody is going to benefit from, hey, write it like you're talking to your best friend. You're telling a story. Some people benefit from different techniques. And I think that that's that's a lot of where we come in, and really working closely with students on their essays. So in working closely with your essay specialist, James, and me on that writing, what are maybe the top 3 things you felt like you gained in your writing from that work together? And what were some of the tools you used aside from free writing, which was a great one over the summer?
Yeah, I would say that one of the most helpful things was sort of, this seems simple, but just another eye to look at my essays.
Mm.
And one thing that was really great was that, Kelsey, I've known you since I was in middle school, but also James, who I just met, really, took time to get to know me, and, through things like free writing and storytelling about my life, really took time to get to know me. And having that extra set of eyes, you know, on the page really, for example, would help with if there's something about me that would really click with the specific school. I should add that into my essay. Or if there's something maybe I should leave out, the same thing, I should take that out. So the extra set of eyes is really helpful. Someone editing even things down to grammatical errors was really helpful. And I guess the second thing that also goes hand in hand with this is sort of that attention to deadlines. I know when I was writing, especially in the beginning of the summer, I got a little bit crazy about it, and I would just not stop rewriting and rewriting. I wrote thousands and thousands of words, and I would, I learned to work not more smarter, than instead of just sort of brute forcing it and writing as much as I could. So I guess those two things go hand in hand.
Okay.
Yeah. And then third, the other thing that really helped, my essay sort of become better was, I would say that that's school research. Starting off, I started to say like, oh, all schools are the same. I'll be fine anywhere. But that's really, once you sort of break through the skin of a school and sort of get into that, its specifics and what they value, what the administration values, what the classes are, clubs, stuff like that. It really sort of helps you elevate your essays because you know who you're writing for, and you know really who your audience is, and what parts of you that you need to put on display. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I think, one of the other things that we do often, because I think students, and I remember you saying this, that students often can find writing, especially just writing about yourself, to be a kind of isolating experience. One of the things that we do at Colledge, and I think that you took part in, were our essay boot camps, which start in July and run through the summer. Basically, it's just a dedicated block of time and space to write essays that are a part of our all-inclusive plans, with an essay specialist right there to offer feedback. And I think that, a lot of what you're talking about, the willingness, getting extra eyes, having editing support, having that knowledge, and also the research and bringing it all together. Sometimes you just need that time and space to really sit down and write. So speaking about time, in your best guess, how many hours do you think it took you to get through that first Common Application essay?
Oh, a lot of, probably more than just a day. I mean, easily more than just a day of writing. I know at the end, just looking through all of the drafts, it was, thousands and thousands of words of just rewriting and editing and sort of this manic kind of, just, lust for the perfect essay. And that's the kind of thing I didn't really start to reach until sort of late summer, because I was able to not only have that assistance, but also that time to experiment with the essay itself. And the Common App essay is a big one because it goes to every school, besides UCs or things like that. And, the prompts are usually very general, which allows the student, or myself in this case, a lot of freedom about what to talk about, which meant that I tried a lot of different things until I found out what really worked. Yeah. So it took a long time.
It took a long time and a lot of work. And I think that, you're leading me into something I want to ask about anyway, which is fate. Choosing your topic is tough. And I think part of it is, what you were describing about this lust for the perfect essay at the beginning, which really at the beginning, you are not going to get to the perfect essay. You're only going to get to the perfect essay, or your own personal super essay, by by going through that process, by experimenting, by trying on different topics. So knowing that other students and I'm sure you found that piece a little daunting, would you be willing to share a little bit about that topic and kind of how you chose it?
Yeah. So I wrote about a part of my life, a medical issue that I had for a long time, and there's a list of prompts. So I attached it to one of the prompts about overcoming adversity,
Right.
and one of the things I attached it to was its effects on my schooling and how it not only made me, how it changed me, I should say, academically, and
Mhm.
how my outlook on my education, but also how it changed me socially and how those things are sort of intertwined, and how overcoming adversity is good, and also sort of helps someone find themselves and makes them into a wiser or more experienced or versed person. So I talked about that, and one thing that I really made a point of was sort of um, talking, like I mentioned, about its effects on my academic life,
Mhm.
because that's what college is all about, and sort of talked about how my outlook on schooling and things like that changed, because that's one thing I knew that a lot of the colleges I was applying to wanted to hear about.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, great. And so I would love for you to contrast this with a different essay that you wrote. Anyone is fine, because that is you wrote a brilliant essay and you really shared about a vulnerable piece of your life experience. You really did a fantastic job. You even had some humor woven in there. I remember well. But I think that there is a misconception out there on the part of the student that if you haven't had some major really tough thing happen to you, or you haven't like won a really big award or something like that, that you don't have anything to write about. So I would love to hear about one of your other essays that kind of contrasts with that, that's completely different, so that people can get a sense of how wide a range of successful topics there are.
Yeah. Uh, I guess I'll talk about my George Washington essay. And I'd like to preface this by saying that what Kelsey said, it's sort of the significance of the event that is in question that you want to talk about to a school is not really the important part. It's what you learned from it and how it changed you that is what you want to put on display to a school. So my George Washington essay was about a social, something called the Social Innovation Program that my school had, and I talked about a documentary we made highlighting the lives and intricacies of street vending in Los Angeles. So I talked about its effects on local communities and how it's such a large part of Los Angeles culture, and how um, the city and a lot of the laws are were anti-street vending, and how that sort of changed and how it can still get better. And the reason that I talked about this was because the George Washington essay prompt was about engaging in discourse that widened my perspective, which this definitely did. But I also know that applying as a political science student, they would want to hear about my sort of life as a change maker. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to talk about an event where I engaged socially in a social justice manner in my community, along with something that really did broaden my horizons,
Mhm.
um, and open my eyes to a whole new world,
Mhm.
not only of street vending but also documentary filmmaking.
Absolutely. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head. It doesn't really matter what the story is. What matters is that you're showing yourself. You're showing what you learned. You're showing how you think. You're showing what matters to you as a person. It can even be something that is a little bit more lighthearted, as long as the content is really directed to you and showing a full picture of you. And so thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've talked a lot now about our work together and kind of the process and where you went and how you journeyed through all of this work. But I'd love to hear about how you started. I know you went to a fairly small high school. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your counseling experience at your high school, but maybe before that, kind of what made you decide that you needed to ask for some additional help on this process?
Yeah. So I'd been going to the same school for 5 years at that point, 6 now, and my school was progressive, experimental, which I really valued. But as someone who was applying to more traditional, some larger schools, I wanted to sort of have another foot in the other side of things, where people looking at my essays and where I was going to show to these schools were more well versed in all aspects of college, but especially that side of more traditional schooling experiences.
Mhm.
So that's why I used the outside counselor. And as school started and I got to meet my college counselor, it was nice to have that extra set of eyes because being a counselor is a very difficult job because you have a lot of kids to not only edit their essays and send in their documents, but also get to know.
Yeah.
So also having another party that was invested in me and my success was very helpful.
Absolutely. And college counselors at the high school level really have an important job, aside from what you said, Zach, in that they have to write all of these letters of recommendation for each and every one of their students, which is a really time consuming process,
Yeah.
and takes a lot of bandwidth and has to do with everything Zach said about letting the counselor get to know you. So it's a really important job. And I think that you really did a good job of taking advantage of everything that your high school counselor had to offer. But I also remember, kind of to the note that you said, that no matter how big or small your school is, no matter how small your school is, your high school counselor is going to have a hefty load of students. And I remember there being a time where it got tough in the fall when we got close to deadline, and your counselor was a little bit less accessible than you would have liked, only because she had such a caseload and she had so much stuff on her
Yeah.
plate. So
And
go ahead.
I especially remember one night, I think it might have been right before UC submission, maybe another school or group of schools, that I was having trouble reaching the counselor, just because of that sort of volume work that needed to be done. And I was like, boom, call up Kelsey, and problem solved, and it was really helpful.
Well, I'm glad that we got to be partners with your family on this process as well. And I think the takeaway there is just that it takes a village, and
Yeah.
having more help on your side is a good thing. And whether that is in the form of your family, your neighbors, your big sister, your aunt, an outside counselor, a tutor, just you need to take advantage. This is a hard process and it's a really important one. And it's important to take advantage of all of the resources out there that are available to you. Okay, so Zach, I want to bring this, kind of wrap things up a little bit, be mindful of time. I want to make sure that we get to any questions that people may have. But I first want to have you think for a second about all of the rising seniors and all of their parents out there listening who are worried about the process, who are worried about essay writing, having just gone through this admissions process. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to seniors and their parents?
Yeah, I guess one piece of advice is that if you haven't started now, either with researching or essays, you're too late. Not too late. You're late. Now's a great time to start getting a jump on those essays before school starts. And I know I groaned at this when I heard it the first time, but it's really something that is vital to the success of this college admissions experience, and it makes things so much easier in the fall. So yeah, definitely get started now. And I guess that will help you with my number 2 thing, which is really try to experiment. Use things like free writing and just hammering away at an essay and rewriting it in different ways, to sort of build it into, especially with the Common App, that quintessential essay that you really feel like shows those parts of yourself that you want to show to colleges. And which that's difficult, and to find what you need to show to colleges, the third thing I would say is really do research. On the surface level, I thought a lot of schools were the same, but once you really start to break them down, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of intricacies that really show you whether you click with this school or not. So my list was almost complete, not completely, but it was a vastly different than when I started.
Mm-hmm.
And it was different for the better at the end, because I was able to break down these schools using a lot of different resources. And Kelsey, you were extremely helpful in this. to sort of find out, do I really like this school, and why do I like this school?
Mm-hmm.
And finding that out before or even during that essay writing experience regarding that school, really is super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this all sort of attaches to the overarching theme of starting now. It's a great time, work outside if you need to. It's good not to be cooped up in the house, but start now for sure.
Great advice, Zach. I think, yeah, get started as soon as you can. And so the last thing I'll ask you is, since you just were mentioning research and how important was that, now is the time that we at Colledge encourage students to think about their early admissions plan and if they're going to, like you, choose an ED school. So can you just share for a little bit about how you chose George Washington as your ED school, and especially in a time where you were unable to go visit in person?
Yeah. Well, I had known for a while that I wanted to go into political science.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard about George Washington through my mom, who went there for 2 years before transitioning schools. And I also heard about it through one of the admissions counselors who came to my school. And so that process looks different for everyone. Everyone finds out about schools in different ways and does research in their own ways. But sort of at the end of the day, it's about finding out, like I've mentioned many times already, about finding out whether you click with the school. And as someone who wanted to study political science and someone who was interested in change making and, a larger college experience, more than my progressive high school, George Washington sort of checked a lot of the boxes for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a decision that I was very happy about making. And on the same hand, there's no pressure to apply early decision. I know a lot of people who didn't apply early decision. But applying early action really does demonstrate that extra interest without, contracting you to that school.
Mm-hmm.
And like I talked about when I was talking about my essay, George Washington sort of reached out to me through their admissions person, who I built up a relationship with, which is something that you really should do. Make an effort to sort of talk with people that go there and admissions people, because that's just another level of showing who you are. And that's how I connected with the school. And everyone has a school they'll connect to, and schools that they may not connect to. And sort of just paring down that list was really important to me, and I think it's a vital part of the experience.
Great. Thank you so much, Zack. You have had so many pearls of wisdom scattered amongst all of the words that you've shared with us tonight, but any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience before we move to questions?
Final words of wisdom. Yeah, so this works for college, but it's also a good thing just for life in general. I found is that if you really start knocking out work early, it pays off in the end. And in the college admissions sort of process, it starts off with starting work early. When school starts, you're really gonna, if you didn't start early, you're really gonna wish that you did, because now that you have schoolwork now to do. And my high school, and I'm sure other high schools, are ruthless with it. I did not catch a break, so I was glad that I was able to start early. And also, on a different note, I would say just to really learn to discover yourself through your essays as well. This is something that I kind of think is inevitable, but your essays become better once you really start to show who you are, which also, putting down who you are on paper is difficult, but it can show you things about yourself that you may not have known before, and that you can appreciate. So, yeah.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Zack. I will myself work on not procrastinating, definitely starting early, and always that self-awareness piece. It's a lifelong learning journey, getting to know yourself. So thank you so much. And for everyone out there, we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. If you have any more questions that we're unable to get to, or you feel like you need more help, please do reach out to us directly. I'm going to put the link in the contact box or in the chat box to contact us if you'd like to do that. And if you have any questions for Zack or for me, please feel free to pop them in the comment box, no matter where you're watching from, and we will do our best to get to them. So I have a question for you, which comes from one of my students. If there was one thing that you could go back in time and tell your younger self about the college admissions process, what would it be?
Well, first off, I would say to write how I talk, because not taking so long to figure that out would have saved me a lot of time.
That's true.
Um, yeah, and I guess that's pretty big. And another thing is to really get started on school research early. You don't need to be set on a final list right at the beginning of summer, but it's something that is good to have. Um, Knowing what you're interested in and knowing what you want to pursue. Not no pressure at working in a specific field, but just sort of knowing what schools sort of appeal to you in regards to your interests and things like extracurriculars you've done in the past. So if I could turn back time, I would personally really try and emphasize more that political science aspect, because that wasn't really something I knew that I was so passionate about really early on. So I wish I discovered that a little earlier.
That's great. And then again, if you could go back in time, how would you approach the start of your essay writing differently, if at all?
Yeah, I would have. That's a good question. I say I would have thought about more of the prompts, because thinking about more of it took me a while to sort of find the Common App prompt that I wanted to cover, because there's a group of them. I don't know how many.
There's 8. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
There's
8
a
of
lot. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So there's a lot of they give you a lot of freedom, which in some
7.
regards,
Sorry, not 8.
7, yeah, they give you a lot of freedom about what to talk about. So in some regards, that's helpful, and in other regards, that can make it more difficult to sort of pare down what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I wish that I earlier sort of found out what aspect of myself that I thought really displayed my personality and the ways I've changed throughout high school and earlier on.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Zach. And as a group that is trying to reach as many families as we can to provide more information, better access to college, I just want to thank you again for joining us, for sharing so openly and so thoughtfully about what your process has been like, and dropping all those pearls of wisdom for our audience.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good luck, everybody. Yeah, it at the end, it's an experience that I'm glad I had, and I think it's very fulfilling. I would say, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear you say that. And I want to thank everyone out there so much for attending tonight. I want to make sure that all of you are getting access to all of our wonderful free resources. So please do make sure to follow us on social media if you felt like tonight was helpful. And then we have a wonderful next event coming up in August, Crushing the Common App, which is actually going to be probably one of our most practically useful talks this year. We're going to be doing a walk through the entire Common application. So for all of my rising seniors out there, this is not one to miss. And for all you parents out there of rising seniors or even younger students, don't let your kids miss it either, because it's going to give you a lot of insight into how to navigate that process, the applications themselves, even though they don't take quite as much revision as the essays do. They're a piece that take a hefty amount of work that people often don't realize take more work than they think. So I want to thank you all again for joining us, and I want to wish you all a very good Sunday night and a great start to the week. Good night.
Stay cool.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good night, everybody.